What's up, everyone? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Niki Lattarulo. Today, I'm joined by SNY Manager of Editorial Production, Danny Abriano, and SNY contributor, Hannah Kaiser. Guys, thanks for joining us here on the show. After winning 6 straight, the Mets were swept by the Rays, their first time being swept this season. Hannah, I'll start with you. How were the Rays able to take such advantage of the Mets this series?
I mean, the Rays have been really, really hot lately, but not this hot. This was certainly a flaw in the Mets pitching. The Rays offense before this weekend, 14th best in baseball this past weekend, third best in baseball overall offense. They do bunt a lot, and you saw that they have some speedy guys. This is interesting because the Mets have been really good at starting pitching this year. Their lineup obviously has a lot of pop and potential, but then maybe they don't always do some of the little things right. We saw Brett Beatty kind of get confused on how to play a bunt, counting on Griffin Canning to get it. And then we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but the lineup with runners in scoring position. I mean, this is the thing. If you catch a hot team, even if you sort of have these big pillars in place when you are going well, like the Mets have been, those little things can start to catch up to you. Those runners in scoring position numbers, and then maybe some of the defensive inexperience and a little bit of ineptness.
Yeah, so the Rays are a team that are getting hot right now, but I don't know, Danny, I'll ask you, is this more about the Rays offense getting hot, or was the Mets pitching just not great this weekend?
I think it kind of boils down to just Megill having his worst start of the season, Canning walking the ballpark on Sunday. I don't view it as an overall pitching thing for the Mets, but they definitely did not do well this weekend. It should also be pointed out that the Mets did not play well, but aside from the first half of Friday's game, but the Rays benefited from tons of luck on balls in play. Mets hit a whole bunch of rockets that found gloves. Lots of balls died on the warning track. It was a really bad weekend weather-wise. It was just one of those really weird series where the Mets kind of had Friday's game in hand. Holmes leaves early because he was on a pitch count. Blackburn struggles in a role he's not accustomed to. They lose that game. It kind of spirals from there. But I wouldn't make much of it beyond just a bad 3-game series.
Yeah, so Danny, you hit on a lot of the things we're going to dive deeper into later in the show. But Hannah, we know the Mets had a really good series against the Rockies, then against the Nationals, but those are not great teams per se. Does this reveal anything about the Mets' consistency against stronger opponents?
I mean, they swept the Phillies earlier in the year. I think the Mets are a legitimately good team. The National League as a whole is better than the American League. So the fact that they're kind of hanging in that division or leading that division right now obviously speaks really, really well to the Mets. I mean, I do think that we're going to talk about the pitching so much, and these guys have been great. Like they've overperformed. What David Stearns is doing is working. The pitching lab, this is the second year in a row it's turning guys out who maybe you didn't expect to be such quality starters. Jeremy Hefner, what he's done with the staff is really, really good. However, I've been thinking about this because last time I was on Baseball Night in New York, we were talking about the Mets pitching staff sort of psychology or approach, philosophy versus the Yankees and going out and signing Max Fried. You don't necessarily, if you don't have Kodai Senga and you don't have Sean Manaea, and we'll talk about David Peterson and whether or not he's an ace, but you maybe don't have that stopper, that guy who you feel like, we definitely are going to get a win with him on the mound, regardless of who the opponent is. So I don't know that this necessarily speaks to the fact that the Mets can't hang with good teams, but to me, it does speak to the fact that, like, if you were in a series against all good teams, maybe the postseason, I don't know that any of the guys who started this weekend are the guys you want in game 1 of a postseason series.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully in the postseason, Kodai Senga back to his ace-like form, and they have him back in that rotation. The Mets pitching has been dominant this season. It started to dwindle down with that league-leading ERA the past 3 games, but the low number of 2.97 has a lot to do with David Peterson. He threw a complete game shutout recently, and then, of course, Kodai Senga looked like he was going to follow that momentum. He did strain his hamstring covering a play at first base. He's on the IL now, and since then, the Mets have had 3 straight games of poor pitching. Danny, I want to start with you. Let's talk about Kodai Senga. He was 7-3, 1.47 ERA. What's the latest on him? Do you know when we can expect him to return?
Yeah, so it's obviously not fortunate for the Mets that he got hurt on that play, but they did get a bit of good news. So it's a grade 1 hamstring strain, which is the least severe. So he's shut down for about 10 days to 14 days. So he should be reevaluated in about a week and a half. Other piece of good news, he's still throwing. So he doesn't need this crazy long ramp up once he's cleared to come back. So if I had to guess, I would put it somewhere around the All-Star break that Senga comes back. So again, not ideal, but also not the end of the world here.
Yeah, and it's nice they do have that all-star break if he needs a little extra time. Hannah, do you think with especially his injury history,
Mhm.
should the Mets take a little more of a cautious approach for Kodai Senga?
Yeah, and well, I think they should take a different approach maybe to the way they approach things internally. Last year, Tim Britton at The Athletic had a story about this week, actually, I guess this weekend, sort of talking about the fact that the Mets and Senga were not necessarily always on the same page last year as he was going through his injury rehab. And that's something that he's talked about this season, feeling like he hasn't quite gotten back to being 100% with his field, all of his pitches. So I think they want to at least be more communicative. Whether or not that translates to being more conservative in his actual timeline remains to be seen. Probably has something to do with what Montas and Manaea look like when they come back, and also just when they come back. But right, I think they want to approach his rehab differently, just so that way they make sure when he is able to come back, he's feeling confident getting back out there on the mound. Because I think he didn't always feel super confident with the timeline they had in mind last season, and even at the beginning of this season, just sort of hit with his own feel. He's a guy who likes to be really in control of his process going into starts, and then really sort of improvisational with his stuff within starts. So I think they learned about Senga as a person from the way they navigated the injury last year, and hopefully that'll help them to navigate the injury this year, such that whenever he does come back, he comes back immediately feeling great, feeling confident, and ready to regain that form.
Yeah, hopefully he could just pick up where he left off. Let's talk about David Peterson. So Senga was the ace. Now it looks like David Peterson kind of taking that role through a 6-game shutout against the Nationals. Now has a 2.49 ERA on the season. Danny, can Peterson now be viewed as the Mets' true ace, even when Senga returns, or are they more of like a really solid 1-2 punch in your opinion?
I think they're a great 1-2 punch, and you add Clay Holmes in there, who's been fantastic as well in his first season as a starter since back when he was a rookie with Pittsburgh. But if you look at Peterson, I mean, it seems sustainable. His walk rate is 2.8 per nine, best of his career. His home run rate 0.5 per nine, best of his career. His FIP, which is fielding independent pitching, 3.04, which shocking, best of his career. So a lot has been made of Peterson's advanced stats and how some of them might not be sustainable. But when somebody constantly outperforms their expected stats, it seems that it's something that is sustainable, and Peterson seems like one of those guys.
Yeah, David Peterson had a really strong second half of the season last year. Hannah, do you think that he's just carrying that momentum? What do you think has led to his evolution of being such a standout pitcher?
Yeah, if you go back to 2023, so before last year, he was working a lot more outside the zone. He was trying to get guys to swing at not strikes. He was trying to induce swing and misses on balls outside the zone. And I just don't know that he has necessarily the stuff, or at least not the fastball stuff. His fastball velo averages like 92 miles an hour. That's 14th percentile in the league. You're not really going to sort of blow a pitch by a guy. And he hasn't super changed up the makeup of his arsenal, but he's using it a little bit differently. And starting in 2024, he began throwing pitches in the zone more, but sort of working to contact on purpose. His ground ball rate now is one of the best in baseball. It's at 94th percentile for the ground ball rate. And so he basically just relies on limiting damage, limiting home runs, limiting extra base hits. He's not trying to strike guys out all the time. He's kind of working to contact. That's also made him more efficient. I mean, that's the kind of thing that even guys like Paul Skeens, who can get strikeouts, sometimes like to do on purpose. They like to figure out how to induce weak contact just so they can be more efficient working through games. So it's a really good profile to have if you don't have overpowering stuff. It makes me a little bit concerned still. I am one of those people who's always a little bit like, well, I wish you could blow the ball past a guy if you had to. That gives me a little bit more confidence when you have a pitcher who does have swing and miss strikeout stuff, just because sometimes, soft contact can lead to bases loaded situations. And then you don't want to give up soft contact. You want to strike a guy out. So his repertoire is certainly working better for him, but I still always feel a little bit nervous when David Peterson starts.
Yeah, David Peterson gets the ball for the Mets tomorrow. Let's talk about Griffin Canning. He was a guy that had a really strong start to the season, 2.47 ERA in first 9 starts, but now a 6.75 over his last 5. Struggled in those last 2 starts, giving up 4 runs in 5 innings to the Nationals, and then, of course, the 6 runs in 4 1/3 inning to the Rays. Danny, what's changed for Griffin Canning in those last 2 outings?
He's just not attacking guys as much. Doesn't look as confident as he did earlier this season. Now he still has a sub-4 ERA overall. He's still been a nice success story coming off a down season last year. So I'm not ready to, or even close to ready to start writing him off. But after a somewhat decent start against the Nats, he kind of just lost it yesterday. He was walking guys. He walked 5 on the day. Threw a wild pitch. He was constantly behind in the count. He threw about 50 of his pitches for strikes, 39 for balls. And he said after the game that he's just not attacking as much as he needs to be. He's nibbling. He's falling behind. Mendoza talked about the fact that his stuff was just not competitive enough. So he just needs to get back to what he was doing earlier this season. He has good enough stuff to succeed. And all he really needs to be for this team is a back-end starter. And I think he still is that guy.
Hannah, what do you think he needs to do to get back on track? Because we know he has the potential to do it. He kind of just needs to also probably mentally get back in it.
Yeah, I mean, the walks are a problem. You can't give any team extra outs, especially like a speedy team like the Rays. They are kind of more aggressive. It was too many walks. That said, I mean, Dan, you kind of alluded to this, a 3.8 ERA for Griffin Canning. If we look up in whatever it is, 4 months, and Griffin Canning has an ERA under 4, that means that the Mets pitching approach this season has worked. That's really the sort of takeaway from this weekend. And the problem is sort of where they are in the schedule. Maybe we'll touch on that with the upcoming series. But listen, like Griffin Canning, 3.8 ERA, fantastic. Sometimes you're relying on not just the back of your rotation, but your rotation depth. And that's fine if it keeps you in a postseason position throughout the course of 162 games. You just want to have guys that you feel more confident putting in playoff starts.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the Manaea injury, the Montas injury. If you knew Griffin Canning was going to give this type of production, I think we'd all take it back at the beginning of the season. Let's talk about Tyler Megill. Since May, he's been a little bit inconsistent. His ERA has climbed to a 3.95, had a pretty bad outing versus the Rays on Saturday. Danny, can Megill still be a part of this starting rotation, or should he be moved to the bullpen, have a little bit of a lesser role when those other guys return?
I mean, I think just out of necessity, he's going to need to be a part of it for another start or 2 or 3. But I do think that once Senga is back, once Manaea is back, once Montas is back, I think he's going to be the first guy to lose his spot in the rotation once the Mets are healthy. Now, it can mean going to the bullpen. It can mean getting sent down to AAA and staying stretched out. He has options. So if the Mets do send him down, they don't run the risk of losing him. So again, he'll be in the rotation for another couple of turns. But barring something weird happening, more injuries popping up, I think he's probably out of the rotation sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Hannah, what do you think about this? Do you think he stays in the rotation, or do you think he has to go to the bullpen?
I think for a lot of years in a row now, the Mets have at some point in the winter thought Tyler Megill is not going to be in our starting rotation. And then come early season, there's Tyler Megill making starts. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a weird thing to say, but he's a really big guy, and those mechanics sometimes are not super consistent. It can be tough to be consistent at that size. I think that he's not a guy they necessarily want to have in their top starting rotation, in their ideal, optimal starting rotation. We've seen this kind of offseason after offseason. They build a rotation that doesn't have a lot of Tyler Megill in there. And so, yeah, I agree. I think he's and the options are a great point. Like if you don't have to send him down for the year, you don't even have to move him to the bullpen. You can let him work through those inconsistencies in his mechanics in AAA. I imagine that's what we'll see. However, I never feel confident saying we'll get to this, but I'm never like, when they have too much pitching, what will they do? Because you very rarely have too much pitching.
Yeah. Danny, why do you think he's struggled to find the consistency? And do you think if they move him to the bullpen, maybe he'll be able to find that consistency a little bit more?
I mean, throughout his career here, he's always been susceptible to either the blow-up inning or the blow-up start. And I mean, that happens to the best guys. It happened to Pedro Martinez. It happened to, just peak Don Drysdale. It happens. But like more than others, it's Megill who is susceptible to these. So it's got to be frustrating for him too, because he's got really, really good stuff. And this year he's been missing bats at an elite rate. But again, we saw it the other day. He just kind of gets beaten up in one inning, lets it get to him. You can see it on his face. When he was getting pulled from the game, he wouldn't even look his teammates in the face. He was so upset at how he performed. So again, that blow-up inning, the blow-up start, he has good stuff. So yeah, if he moves to the bullpen, maybe harnessing that in a one-inning stint, in a two-inning stint, might be a better fit for him long-term.
Yeah, for sure. Someone that we may be also thinking about moving, Clay Holmes. He has a 2.87 ERA. He pitched 5 efficient innings on Friday, 79 pitches. We know he was on that pitch count before he was pulled, leading to that bullpen collapse. Said he was feeling the effects of pitching with the altitude. Hannah, on your last visit here, you mentioned the Mets should consider moving Holmes to the bullpen due to his rising innings total. Do you still feel that way, especially now with Senga on the injured list?
I mean, obviously with Senga on the injured list, it changes things. I think at the time we were specifically talking about like what to do when you have too much of a good thing. But I do think they're trying to limit his innings. What they did was at Friday's start. Yeah. That's they're doing that on purpose. They're trying to kind of piggyback guys, I think, across the board, not just with Clay Holmes, but with a lot of these guys who sort of overperformed, having their career years in the starting rotation. They maybe want to preserve that, not just their innings limit, but preserve the kind of exposure that they're getting to the opposition. I still really like the idea of putting Holmes, not just kind of having him be a starter with an innings or with a pitch limit, but I like the idea of putting him back in the bullpen if he's open to it. And I'm not trying to like marginalize you, Clay Holmes. If you're doing great as a starter, this is not a commentary on your performance. I just think you have that weapon. You know, this is a guy who can be really, really good, really effective, and can, coming out of a bullpen. I think we'll talk about this. It's not necessarily a skill everybody has. He's done it. He's done it for the New York Yankees, the biggest stage. So that's kind of like a bullet you can use at some point this season if you want to severely limit his innings while still getting him regular reps and you want to maximize how good he is. I like the idea of putting him in the bullpen at some point if you have the starters to fill out the rotation.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head because we've seen the Mets struggle taking their starters out and then the bullpen coming in and completely blowing things up. So it goes to show a lot of people they're not good out of the bullpen, and we know Clay Holmes is. Danny, how can the Mets balance Holmes' workload while still really trying to win every game? Because they could have won that game probably if they left him in a little bit longer on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I think back in the day, even going back 10 or 15 years, guys used to pitch deeper into games. It's more of a 5-6 inning thing now, even if guys get that far. So I don't think as it pertains to Holmes, it's that big of a deal that he's not going to give you as many innings as somebody who's been starting for 5 years or 10 years. And on the Holmes bullpen thing, I mean, I see what Hannah's saying. I understand the desire to shore up the bullpen even more. But should be noted, if he does go back to the bullpen this year, it's probably where he's staying. He's been stretched out as a starter. But again, if you do have a ton of guys, if you find yourself with 8 or 9 guys for 5 spots in August and Holmes is hitting his limit, sure, maybe. But saving that, I think he should probably stay in the rotation.
I do want to say on this subject, I think it's really interesting to think about the way the question is phrased. Like, how can they limit his innings while still trying to win every day? I've been thinking about this a lot because the Dodgers are as a team almost philosophically throw some games. And I'm not saying they should have thrown that game that Clay Holmes started because that was a great performance. They played that according to script really, really well. The bullpen didn't hold it for them. But it is tough to balance over a long season. You see a team as good as the Dodgers sometimes just kind of phoning it in. They did it even in the postseason last year. They did it against the Mets. They did it even in the World Series. You actually kind of can't prioritize winning every game, and that's what happened on Friday. They put some of their lower leverage relievers in there because they thought the lead was sufficient. And if that blows up in your face, I don't think you can kind of rethink your strategy. I think you just have to be like, listen, we can't rely on the highest leverage relievers in every single start. We can't necessarily give ourselves the optimal chance to win every single game. You do sometimes have to play the odds. Is this lead safe? Is this team not going to get to us? Is this position in our season, in our series, in our whatever standings, a place where we can afford to be a little less locked down with the bullpen? And that I just want to sort of caution Mets fans against overreacting to the way that played out. That plays out that way. Sometimes you can't win 162 games, and even the Dodgers aren't trying to win 162 games.
And just to jump in for a second, like Hannah said, it's the long game. You have to play the long game, especially if you're a team like the Mets and you expect to be playing not only in October, but deep into October. There was a game maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago where they went to their lower leverage relievers. Fans were up in arms, furious. You can't have Diaz pitching every day. You can't have Stanek pitching every day. You can't have Garrett pitching every day. You've got to pick and choose your spots. So, I think what we've gotten to is a point where some fans treat every game like it's a football game, like one of 17. It's one of 162. So I think it's important to understand the Mets have a long game plan here and just give them the benefit of the doubt. They kind of know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's also June. I don't think they're worried too much about trying to stretch people out, especially with the injuries to the starting rotation. Need to give everyone the rest they need this early on when, of course, they do have a winning record as well. Let's talk about some of those injuries. Frankie Montas and Manaea, both pitchers, have now struggled in their minor league outings. Frankie Montas' final line, AAA, Syracuse on Friday. 1 2/3, 7 hits, 8 earned runs on 53 pitches. Mendoza said he will be ready after his next rehab outing, but do you think they should call him up or wait till he's found his rhythm because he's really been bad in the minors? Hannah, we'll start with you.
Oof, he's been really bad. I think I saw I saw some of the Carlos Mendoza's comments about like, well, it's spring training for him and the batters. It's not spring training for them. And it's like, exactly. Oh, but if he's got one more start, it should be the end of spring training for him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. This is why people didn't love the signing to begin with. I don't have a great answer for you on this one, Niki. I'm sorry, because I think that we have to trust that the Mets are analyzing something a little bit more specific than just minor league rehab start results. That maybe that they want him to be working on something in particular. They're looking for a certain feel, a certain like specific pitch performance, and if hopefully they see that in the next starts. They do need some reinforcements. I know it's felt like embarrassment of riches on the pitching staff, but they're going into a really tough stretch of their schedule in terms of their opponents. So hopefully he looks great in his next start. I can't solve this one for you. I'm sorry. Frankie Montas is going to have to solve this one for them.
Listen, I'm trying to be nice. I'm like, he's not great in the minors right now, but like you said, it's spring training for him, but it's still, the batters are going to be so much better when he's up with the big league club anyway. So if it was me, I'd wait till he finds a rhythm, but they don't always have that choice. Danny, when he returns, do you think he should be a starter or should they put him into that bullpen that's already kind of having some issues?
I think they might need him in the rotation, at least for a little bit. And again, he's here for next year too. So I think the Mets can afford to see if he can be good in the rotation before they think about putting him in the bullpen. And again, like Hannah said, not good rehab outings for Montas, but when the lights go on, maybe something clicks for him. Maybe he's working on stuff. Maybe he's just going through the motions down there. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like he's kind of just getting his head kicked in. But I wouldn't expect him to just keep getting battered start after start. So when he comes back, I think you put him in the rotation, see how it goes. And then once you start getting healthy, you can think about what to do down the line.
Listen, we've seen people not do well in their rehab starts and then come back and it's like nothing ever happened. So maybe that will be the case with him. Let's talk about Manaea. His line with the Cyclones was 2 1/3, 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. So also not great, Danny. Any concerns about his outing? They need one of these guys to come up and look like their old self, I think.
I mean, I think I'd put Manaea in a different category than Montas. I mean, he was so good last year, especially after he dropped his arm slot late in the season. He just seemed to tire out in the playoffs, but I would not really concern myself with how he's pitching during these rehab starts. I would just worry about how many innings is he going? Does he feel good after the start? Is he building up at the proper rate? So that's what I would look at for Manaea. I would imagine he's got 2 or 3 more starts and he's back. And when he returns, I mean, that's one of the things that's going to help the Mets without Senga. I mean, you lose Senga, who's your unquestioned ace so far this season, but you're getting Manaea back hopefully in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks. So that should help blunt the force of that injury.
It's honestly crazy if you think about the fact that the Mets are doing this well and Manaea hasn't pitched a single game. Like, honestly, we'll take it. But Hannah, how aggressively should the Mets try to push to bring him back, especially now with Senga out?
I think not too aggressively, just because of where they are in the standings. Although it sounds like, I don't know his timeline. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate that. It sounds like they're not going to get him back in time for this next run against division opponents. So they're going to have to. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they're going to have to figure out ways to win without their best pitchers over the next 2 weeks or week and a half. Because I don't think you want to be. We keep sort of hitting on this point, but there's no point in being overly aggressive in June for a team that's on a postseason track. I mean, their playoff odds took a hit in this series. I was just looking, I was like, how bad can you ding your own playoff odds by getting swept when the Phillies win 3 in a row. And their playoff odds went down 5 percentage points, but it's still at 91%. So I think you don't want to be overly aggressive with any pitcher, especially in June, for a team that has October aspirations.
So we know that Paul Blackburn has kind of had his role shifted a little bit, but he is expected to start on Wednesday. He had a great start against the Dodgers, and then he struggled in his last 2 appearances coming out of the bullpen, gave up 3 runs in Colorado, and then had 1 out in his last outing, gave up 4 runs in that outing. Danny, is this just a sign of the difficulty of making the transition from starter to reliever, or did he just have 2 off nights and there's nothing really to worry about?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I wouldn't expect Blackburn to be lights out on Wednesday, but he even said it after the game. He's not used to relieving. And, he went from being on the IL, missing a really long time at the end of last year, beginning of this year. He comes back. He makes a really good spot start. He's thrust right back into the bullpen. Now he's making a start again. It's difficult, no matter how good you are, to go back and forth, especially when you're recovering from an injury. You haven't pitched in a long time. So I would chalk it up to a little bit of both. But I think he'll be fine in a fill-in role as long as they need him, and then maybe later in the year he'll find a home in the pen and get used to it.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how he looks on Wednesday. Hannah, should the Mets consider calling up a pitching prospect while navigating Senga's injury, or do you think they should just stick with who they got while they're waiting for Manaea and Montas to come back?
I think not if it's purely in service of navigating the injury. If they have someone, if they really feel like the prospects are ready, that makes sense. But this is why you construct a starting rotation the way that David Stearns does, because you want to have these pieces that can be moved around. You want to have a lot of like major league experience depth. They've done kind of the same thing 2 years in a row, which is get guys with a like decent amount of major league experience and then made them a little bit better, so that way they can sort of mix and match and be utilized and deployed in this way. You want the ace in Kodai Senga, obviously, for those big moments, but this is what the pitching staff is built to withstand. It's built to withstand some injury and, to rely on the depth. And it'll not always look like it has the past 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was doing well. And then just a couple rough days, we're going to put those behind us because the Mets have a big stretch coming up. They're set to face the Braves, who obviously aren't looking great right now. But when the Braves and Mets face off, it's always something to keep your eye on. They're followed then by a series against the Phillies, then back against the Braves. It's their first matchup with Atlanta this season. Philly has lost 6 of 7 before bouncing back with 4 straight wins. They now sit just 2.5 games behind the Mets. Danny, we'll start with the Phillies. How do you assess the Phillies right now?
They're dangerous, and they've always been dangerous. They've got a really good starting rotation led by Zach Wheeler. They can beat the hell out of you on offense. It's never fun going into Philadelphia to play them. The fans are rabid. It's a tough ballpark to pitch in. I think they're the main competition, obviously, in the NL East with the way the Braves have been playing. I'd be surprised if the Mets went ahead and ran away with it. The 5.5 game lead was nice while they had it, but they built a big cushion, so you're able to get swept and not lose your lead. But I look out for Bryce Harper and his injury. He's dealing with the same wrist injury he had last year. So I'd expect that to linger a little bit. Not sure how well he's going to perform when he comes back. So if I'm a Phillies fan, that's what I'm concerned about right now.
Hannah, you mentioned the Mets' long-term playoff odds. How important are these games for the Mets in maintaining those odds?
I mean, they're really important. We touched on the fact that the National League as a whole is really, really good. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of competition for those wild card spots going into the season. There are certain divisions where you're playing for the wild card and certain divisions where you're playing for a division win. And the NL East has given us wild card teams the last couple of years, but the NL across the board has all gotten a lot better this year. So the wild card spots in some ways are the most contentious. I imagine that there will be a lot of teams in the running for those spots as we come down the stretch, and a lot of teams that are looking to add at the trade deadline to put themselves in position to contend for those wild card spots. So this is a year where the Mets really want to win the division because they don't want to get stuck in that throng of could be 10 teams competing for 3 wild card spots going into the final month. So I think that this is a really important stretch of games. You don't have as many games against your division rivals as you used to. Now that everybody plays everybody, it's more of a balanced schedule. So if you are in a close, hotly contested division and you really are gunning to win that division, you have to win the games against your division rival.
Yeah, let's dig a little deeper into the division. Danny, do you expect this race to come down to the wire for the division, or do you think the Mets have a chance to pull away, especially if they win most of these games this week and next week?
I think they have a chance to pull away. I wouldn't expect it. It's rarely easy in the NL East. And to kind of piggyback off what Hannah said, I mean, you definitely want to win the division. It's hard for me to envision a scenario where the Mets don't make the playoffs, but not just winning the division, but getting one of those top two spots, because then you have a bye into the LDS. And I can go off on a tangent here about how dumb I think the 3-game series is. You play 162, and then you get stuck in kind of a do or die spot if you lose game 1 of a 3-game series. But the Mets should be going all out to win these games, because again, you get stuck in that wild card scenario, or if you finish with the 3rd best record, your season could be over very, very quickly. So they should be up and ready for these games.
And I feel like the Braves, although they had a really bad start, they're 31-39. They're 14 games behind the Mets. I don't think they should be overlooked because they're still the Braves. But why do you think they've struggled so much this season, Danny?
I mean, their offense just hasn't been consistent enough. They're not getting enough from their stars. They've had a couple injuries in the rotation. Ronaldo Lopez is out for the year. And they've kind of just been snake bit a little bit. I mean, if you look at their run differential, they shouldn't be as bad as they are. So I'll believe the Braves are dead when the season's over and they're not in the playoffs. They're just too good, too much talent for me to think they're going to be this bad for much longer.
Yeah, 14 games back honestly means nothing when you're thinking about the Braves. Hannah, is it with the Mets and Phillies playing really well? Is it too late for the Braves to make a playoff push, or do they have a little? All right, we'll go back to Danny. Do they have a little OMG Met in them? Or Hannah, if you
Sorry.
got
Sorry.
you. No, you're good.
I don't know what's happening. So ask me the question, Niki. I'd love to know.
So the Phillies and Mets are obviously playing really well. The Braves haven't been playing great, but it's still the Braves. Do they have a little OMG Met in them? Can they make that playoff push still?
Well, they have a little 2022, was it, Braves magic in them? I mean, that year, Alex Anthopoulos went out at the deadline. He added a couple of, fourth outfielders, and they went on to win the World Series without Ronald Acuna Jr. So it is never too late for the Braves. This is now 2 years in a row. So in 2023, their offense led the league in slugging, set historic home run rates, and it's a lot of the same guys. It's Austin Riley, it's Matt Olson, and they're just not slugging at the same rate. And this is now 2 years in a row that they've struggled to find that kind of pop. So it does feel like maybe these guys are getting a little bit older, whatever it is, but they have Acuna back, they have Strider back, and I would never count out the Braves. They managed to win a World Series without an MVP.
Yeah, that's correct. So the Mets and Braves begin their series tomorrow. David Peterson on the mound. That game is in Atlanta. So hopefully Mets can get back to their winning ways. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Mets Off Day Live. For Niki Lattarulo, Danny, and Hannah, we will see you back here next time.